Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from the SugarHuddle.com. Well, we had three pretty decent Thanksgiving games this year. Sometimes with Thanksgiving, you don't really know what you're going to get with these games. Sometimes the matchups aren't great, and sometimes the games themselves, even if it's a decent matchup, doesn't always turn out well. As we know, NFL games on short weeks are always crapshoots. But this year, three pretty decent games as usual. The typical Detroit game, Dallas game, and then, of course, the last several years, NBC adding an intriguing matchup at a prime time on Thanksgiving. This year it was the Falcons at the Saints, which preseason was supposed to be a really strong matchup, and even right now with the Falcons' struggles, was still supposed to be a pretty intriguing matchup. But nonetheless, overall they turned out to be three pretty good games. So, anyways, the Bears, somewhat surprisingly, and I'll tell you why it was surprising, because obviously they're the NFC North leaders, but they somewhat surprisingly were able to beat the Lions 23-16. The Cowboys had a nice run there, late third and early fourth. They were able to pull out the win there, 31-23, and then finally the Saints were able to run away early and often against the Falcons. Falcons squandered a lot of opportunities, and anyhow, Saints ended up winning that game 31-17, extend their winning streak to 10 games now. But anyways, I just want to go down the line and kind of break all those games down. The Lions game, the reason why it was surprising that the Bears won the game is because of the simple fact that, as everybody knows now, obviously, that Mitchell Trubisky, he couldn't play in this one. I believe it was a shoulder injury. I believe the shoulder injury is what he had. But anyways, couldn't play in this one. So Chase Daniel, 9-year backup quarterback, only making his third career start, had less than 100 career pass attempts coming in. Made over $28 million, though, so good for him. Made pretty cool video that was on Twitter and YouTube, pretending to be a fan of the Bears training camp practices, disguised and getting autographs of his teammates, which is pretty cool. But anyways, making only his third career start after all these years. And so, Bears on the road, short week. Some people thought that maybe Detroit could, get the win, including myself, or at the very least it was going to be down on the wire game, and it was a down on the wire game. But I still thought maybe Detroit would find a way to win this one. So, anyways, the way it started out is, Daniel not being the usual starter. There were a lot of issues there early on. He missed on a couple throws. There was a lot of dinking and dunking, a lot of short passing, a lot of punts. He was 9 for his first 11 for like 46 yards. So you do the math on the yards per attempt and yards per completion. Obviously, they're terribly low numbers for any level of football. And then on Detroit's side of it, their offense has had a lot of issues the last several weeks, and they only have really one deep threat, and they've been giving up a lot of sacks, and they've been dinking and dunking a whole lot. Part of that was because of the offensive line, but they've been dinking and dunking a whole lot. The running game's all over the place, and they started out dinking and dunking a lot. And this one, Matthew Stafford, even after their first touchdown drive, he was like 13 of 15 for 78 yards. So another, do the math on the yards per attempt, yards per completion, really, really low numbers. So early on, both sides just dinking and dunking. So it was a pretty boring first quarter, and luckily the game really got a lot better after that. But Detroit ended up striking first. They started to kind of find their groove offensively, started attacking downfield a little bit more. They lucked out on a 4th and 1 attempt where the ball got tipped up in the air, and Nick Bellore, former NFL linebacker that's been converted to fullback this past year, he dove and caught it and extended the drive. And then LeGarrette Blount, always tough with bouncing off of defenders with his second and third efforts, he gets the 4-yard touchdown run, makes it 7-0. Later on at 7-3, though, later in the first half, the Bears finally kind of get going. Daniel finally finds his groove. A couple of nice chunk plays. He finds Taquan Mizell on back-to-back plays, and of course the second of which a 10-yard touchdown pass. And it was really an interesting play because Mizell became wide open to catch that pass, and what ended up happening is the refs initially called it off and said that it was a pick on Allen Robinson, that he threw a pick against one of the Detroit defensive backs. But then they got together and they discussed it, and they decided it wasn't a pick. And if you look at the replay, it was close, but Robinson, basically what he did is he turned around like he was running his route, and then he stuck his hands out like he was, expected the ball to come to him, and the defender basically ran into him. So it's really hard to kind of say it was on, it's like a pick on Robinson. So it was borderline, but it was a nice gray area play, execution-wise, by the Bears, and they got the touchdown there. Then they curiously went for two, which was really stupid, and of course they didn't get it. So they went up 9-7 going in the half. Detroit ends up scoring later on in the third quarter, make it 13-9. But then after that, the Bears break it open. They go on another really nice drive, and they end up going ahead 16-13. Then Detroit quickly ties it with a field goal, and then the Bears go, they end up having to punt. So then now all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, maybe Detroit, they're back in control of this one. And then the very next play after they get the ball back, Matthew Stafford stares down his tight end, Michael Roberts, and Eddie Jackson perfectly times a route, jumps in front of it, and takes it back 41 yards the other way. It's his second pick six in as many games, his third defensive touchdown already this year. The Bears defense, leads the league in takeaways. They have 29 now. Another big game for them with a couple of interceptions. So, anyways, that put the Bears up 23-16, and then Detroit had one last shot at the end, and driving down. It's like, I want to say it was like 3rd and 9 from the 11-yard line or something like that, somewhere around there. But anyways, or it might have been 3rd and 5. But anyways, so Stafford, he throws basically like a fade, and it goes to the back of the end zone. It's picked off by the Bears, and that pretty much pulls it away. I think that was Kyle Fuller that picked it off. But on the play, Michael Roberts, it looked like he kind of stopped, or maybe he expected the ball to come more at the goal line instead of towards the back of the end zone, and Fuller pushed off on him and then picked it off. So it really should have been pass interference, and I still don't understand how it wasn't pass interference on Chicago. So anyways, it was kind of a screwed up play all the way around, and that's all she wrote for Detroit. But from Detroit's point of view, it was just a very, very disappointing and demoralizing loss, because of the simple fact that when you have, no matter how good Chicago is, when they're coming to your place and they've got this backup quarterback coming in, you feel pretty good that you can pull off the win, especially how well you played in the win this past Sunday against the Panthers. And you think, okay, we have a pretty good shot here. And for them to give this game away, and in some senses they gave it away, even though it was a back and forth game, but in some senses to give it away and squander this opportunity, all of a sudden they're 4-7. They're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but at 4-7, they're pretty much out of it. And it's really good for other teams that are right ahead of them in the NFC. These teams that are in that 5-5, 5-6, 6-5 range. Now they're feeling like that's one less team we have to compete with. So Detroit, you have to win out. Finish 9-7. Even then, there's a good chance you won't get in, or you'll lose on some sort of tiebreaker. So really a killer loss for the Lions. Stafford didn't, he had his moments, and like I said, he really only has a one deep threat in Kenny Golladay, who had a really nice game, and then Blunt had 88 yards and a score. But nonetheless, he didn't really look that great. And then, Detroit on the other side of it, Stafford had a pick six, so you can't say that their defense played bad or anything, but certainly Daniel down the stretch certainly got better and had the drive that put him ahead 16-13, and Detroit's defense could have done a little bit more. They needed like a key takeaway, because remember, Daniel didn't have any turnovers in this game, and Detroit, they scored their first touchdown off of a Bears turnover on a lost fumble by Trey Burton. So one of those things that the Lions defense could have done more, but certainly the offense needed to do a lot more as well. Just a killer loss for them, and I believe they have to play the Rams next. So yeah, they play the Rams next, so it's only going to get worse for them. So just a long season, Detroit, and long season for Matt Patricia and company trying to figure this whole thing out. But the defense hasn't gotten any better, and the offense has only regressed. So this first season under Patricia is a tough one, and we know how the Belichick coaching tree has been in the NFL. And then on the other side of it, Chicago, just shows that, really good teams, they can insert their backup quarterback, and they're a good enough team that they can find a way to win. And Daniel, as the game went on, got a lot better. He's in a position where he could, depending on Trubisky's situation, could end up starting again next week. They play the Giants, game that they could definitely win, and a game where Daniel could come in and start and do a decent enough job. So, we'll see how it goes. But Chicago's defense again stepping up, rising to the challenge. Bears playing a lot of complimentary football right now. They're 8-3, really taking control of the NFC North, and they're a team. We've seen a lot of teams this year that aren't really playing defense in the NFL, and here's a team that is playing a lot of defense. So they're going to be a dangerous team in January, especially with a healthy Trubisky, and Trubisky that, let's say, plays a little bit more consistent, because we know how he can be at times, but he's getting better. So it'll be interesting with the Bears, but really, really nice win for Chicago. Really, I don't like to say a statement win when you're playing a losing team, but this game I thought was just as important as the Vikings win. So nice job for Chicago. And the second game, speaking of backups, of course, Washington, because of Alex Smith's unfortunate broken leg, Colt McCoy, he's the guy now, and a lot of people say that he wasn't really much of a downgrade from Alex Smith. And in some ways, there's some truth to that as far as their style of play and everything. But one thing you kind of have to consider is that Alex Smith's been starting for all these years, a former number 1 overall pick, and McCoy, a former third-round pick, has been mainly a backup all these years after getting some starts the first couple of years. So you have to realize that there's a reason behind that. So that was one thing that's a little bit concerning about the whole, it's not going to be much of a downgrade from Smith to McCoy. Maybe not the playbook, but still there's certain mistakes that McCoy will make and did make that maybe Smith wouldn't have made. But, in this game, slow start for Washington. Dallas goes up early, and then Washington, they start to heat up towards the end of the first half and into the third quarter. They have a lead. They're up 13-10, and then all of a sudden, Dallas scores 21 straight points in, I believe it was a 7-minute and 36-second stretch into the very early portion of the fourth quarter. And what happened was Washington's secondary, which, remember, they went out and they got Clinton Dix, and that hasn't helped them much at this point. But, their secondary was making a lot of mistakes, some arm tackles that didn't work out. They're falling down, they're trying to defend receivers, a couple of costly penalties once again, and Amari Cooper had 2 long touchdown receptions, both of them against Quentin Dunbar, who, he fell down the first time. Second time, tried to make an arm tackle, was unsuccessful. So 40 and 90-yard touchdown receptions for Cooper, 8 catches on 9 targets, 180 yards and 2 scores in this one. And then Dak Prescott on that third touchdown to make it 31-13 early in the fourth. He scrambles around on 3rd and goal from the 5, and eventually he's able to find an opening and get in for the touchdown. And even then, Washington did a nice job of still getting themselves back in the game. They scored quickly, make it 31-20, but then they squandered an opportunity and also got a bad call that didn't go their way on an interception, in which it looked like, the Dallas defender, Xavier Woods, looked like he might have interfered with the receiver, Maurice Harris, before the bad throw came in, and he was able to pick it off. And so that was a huge setback, because Washington just stopped Dallas on a 4th and 1. And then Washington eventually gets it back. They kick a field goal, make it 31-23, but then they can't get the onside kick, and that's all she wrote. So, it was one of those games where, from Washington's point of view, McCoy, a couple touchdown passes, but he also had 3 interceptions, and 2 of them were on him, and the last one, kind of hard to say it was on him because it should have been a penalty. But, nonetheless, you look at it, Alex Smith, he had a couple interceptions in that last game against Houston, but generally he doesn't throw hardly any interceptions. And so, you wonder if he was playing this game, just hypothetically speaking, if he was playing this game, maybe he only throws 1 interception the whole game or none. And that's kind of the difference with him and McCoy, is McCoy was still forcing some throws in there, trying to sling some throws in there where there was nothing. Now, the flip side of it is he did a really nice job connecting with his tight ends. Both Vernon Davis and Jordan Reed both, had some real big plays in this one. But anyways, Washington's kind of in the same position as Detroit, in the sense that they really only have the one deep threat, and in their case, it was Paul Richardson who's injured. So, Washington is really kind of struggling, trying to find guys to step up a receiver. Trey Quinn, the rookie, did a nice job in this one, had a touchdown as well. But they're still trying to kind of find somebody there. In the running game, they couldn't really get the running game going all day long, and even short yardage, in the in some past games, they've had good luck with it. But even this game, short yardage was very hit or miss. Struggled to convert on a lot of second and third and ones for a little while there. They ended up with 20 carries for 80 yards and a score. So running game couldn't get going again, and that's unfortunately for them becoming a little bit more of a theme than they want it to be. And defensively, last time out, I think they gave up 73 rushing yards total to the Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott had 15 carries, 33 yards, stopped dead in his tracks. This time it was a total 180 effort, not in a good way, by the Redskins defense. Even though they made some key stops here and there, those 2 long touchdown passes, very avoidable. All of a sudden, Dak Prescott ends up with 289 yards, a season high, after not really playing that, being kind of okay in the first half. Was sacked 4 times the first half. They didn't sack him after halftime, and they made him look really, really good in the second half of those 3 scores. And then Elliott had 121 rushing yards. As a team, they had 146, so that would have doubled what they had last time. So all around, Washington's defense just didn't get the job done. And when you're in a situation where you have this backup quarterback, similar to Chicago with Chase Daniel, even though Chicago's not going to be starting him as long, maybe not even again the rest of the year, whereas obviously Washington is stuck with McCoy the rest of the year. But when you're in a situation where you have your backup quarterback starting for however long, you have to play that quote-unquote complementary football. You have to make sure that your defense is playing high level every week. You got to make sure your skill position guys are stepping up. You got to do what you can. And the quarterback himself has to make sure that he's not making mistakes. And, Chicago, Chase Daniel, 0 turnovers, a couple touchdown passes. Like I said, he really started kind of getting a groove. Chicago didn't have a running game, but defensively, they made a lot of big plays. And, of course, 2 interceptions and the pick 6, really turned that around for them. But then again, with Washington, you give up big plays on defense. McCoy himself with the interceptions, running game's not getting going. So you're not really playing that complementary football to help out your backup quarterback, now turned starter. So tough for Washington, and they're in a position now where they play at Philly next week, and Washington's 6-5. So, they're in a position where it doesn't eliminate them from anything at all if they were to lose the Eagles again next week. But really, that's a huge game for them. If they can get that win and improve to 7-5, that would be huge for them, because they fall to 6-6. All of a sudden, Philly's back in it. Dallas will probably end up falling to 6-6 as well, and I'll get to that in a second. But nonetheless, you don't want to lose that third in a row. So that's a huge, huge game for them. And we'll see if they can play that complementary football against another struggling football team in the Philadelphia Eagles, who they themselves aren't really playing a whole lot of complementary football right now. So, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And then for the Cowboys, Dak, like I said, kind of Jekyll and Hyde with him. Okay at best in the first half. Terrific in the second half. And part of that, too, was the mistakes by the Redskins. Running game getting going. Amari Cooper, I hate to say he's totally worth giving up a first-round pick for, because, again, we have to kind of see how it plays out. But definitely Dak's favorite target by far. Obviously a heck of a game. But, you look at it, they did a terrific job, both sides of the football. Played a really nice, solid game on both sides. 3 takeaways were big. Shutting down the running game, getting some sacks on the Redskins was really nice. But, you're in a position now where everybody's high on you. They're driving your bandwagon. You've won 3 in a row. You're 6-5. You're tied up top the standings now with the Redskins. And everybody's kind of thinking that you control your own destiny in a sense. Well, guess what? You have a pretty tough schedule down the stretch. And it starts next Thursday when you host the Saints to close out your homestand. So now it's like, how good are the Dallas Cowboys? Because they're playing the New Orleans Saints, which is a huge, huge measuring stick for this football team. And it's definitely a game where Dak Prescott, he's going to have to play at a high level for 4 quarters. They've been doing such a great job of running the ball the last few weeks. Can they do it again? And then can Dallas's defense hold up? There were 2 or 3 calls that could have easily gone against Dallas that didn't, including that interception that I mentioned. And so, even though you're going to be back at home, maybe you don't get those calls again next week. And again, Drew Brees isn't going to make the mistakes that Colt McCoy is going to make, obviously. So this could be really interesting measuring stick for Dallas. So it's nice for them to get to 6-5, but you do have to wonder if they lose to New Orleans next week, do they lose some of that swagger, some of that confidence, and then where's their mindset from there? Because obviously you're going to eventually be playing Philadelphia one more time, and then you play the Giants, I think, in the regular season finale. And you have a couple of pretty challenging games in between. I want to say offhand it's the Colts and the Titans, or not? They already play the Titans, the Colts, and somebody else in between. But whatever the case is, they've got a pretty challenging schedule here to close it out. So it'll be interesting to see how Dallas carries this momentum against New Orleans next week in yet another home game. We'll see. And then finally, speaking of New Orleans, them and the Falcons, really, really interesting game because, Falcons, another team similar to Detroit where they really can't afford to lose anymore if they want to somehow make the playoffs. Like Detroit, that came in this game 4-6 and came out 4-7. And in the case of Atlanta, in the article that I posted on the sugarhuddle.com, and also please remember to go to sugarhuddle.com and check out the article and check out all the other good stuff, all the content I got on there. But on the sugarhuddle.com NFL Thanksgiving thoughts article that I wrote, I kind of started out really talking about Atlanta more than New Orleans because New Orleans is another, typical great performance like we've seen throughout the year. But, with Atlanta, what I highlighted with them is they squandered so many opportunities. They had so many chances. What I said in the article is they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. And, it was one of those things that opening drive, well, really before kickoff, they hurt themselves because they decided to defer to the second half. They won the coin toss. Instead of taking the ball first, they decided to play defense first, which is kind of foolish to begin with. And, of course, New Orleans drives right down the field. And what they do, they score a touchdown, a 28-yard touchdown pass to Tommy Lee Lewis from Drew Brees, who had 4 touchdowns in this one, per usual. We know how great he is, MVP leader. But anyways, so they let New Orleans drive down the field and score right away. Well, then they themselves, they go down the field, and I think they went like 9 plays and 66 yards, something like that. And all of a sudden it's third and goal from or it's 3rd and 2 from the 3-yard line. So they get to the 1 for the first down, or they can score a touchdown, obviously. And anyways, Matt Ryan drops back, gets sacked, loses the ball. New Orleans recovers. All of a sudden, you're like, this is like the nightmare start that Atlanta wanted to avoid. And of course, the next drive, what does Ryan do? He gets sacked and fumbles again, middle of the drive as they're in New Orleans territory. Does recover this one, but eventually they have to settle for a field goal, make it 7-3. And anyways, New Orleans, before you know it, it's a 17-3 ball game. Late in the first half, Atlanta's driving. Julio Jones catches the ball around the New Orleans 15-yard line and gets the ball ripped out by Alex Anzalone. And all of a sudden, the Saints are able to recover it inside their own 15-yard line. Another fumble recovery. So, it could have easily been pretty much a tie ball game going into the half. Who knows? Maybe even Atlanta would have had a lead. And instead, they're down 17-3. And just all these points left on the table. When you're playing a team like the Saints, you can't leave any points on the table. That's something, obviously, Dallas is going to have to realize next week when they play them. But they left all these points on the table. The Falcons did. And in the second half, it didn't get any better because they opened up their first drive of the second half. They decided to go for it on 4th and 2. They were at, I want to say it was, I don't think they were at their own, they're at their own 48, maybe. They were they're basically right at midfield. I think they're at their own 48. But anyways, the point is, they don't get that. So then New Orleans gets it right back. They end up scoring. Then, they had another huge mistake when Ryan, he has this bad habit. He's done it throughout his 11-year career of locking onto one receiver, staring him down. Obviously, his main guy last several years has obviously been Julio Jones. Tried to stare down Julio Jones. A.J. Klein picks him off easily. And then another mistake later on, even later than that. Calvin Ridley, he's catches the pass. He's getting ready to go in the end zone and score. He gets stripped. I think it was around the 2 or 3 yard line, somewhere around there. Saints recover. So, anything that could go wrong did for these Falcons, and certainly not trying to take away from the Saints, and I'll get to the Saints in a moment, but anything that could go wrong did for these Falcons. Also, at the end of the game, last 8 minutes, they're trailing by 21 points, 31-10, and they showed no sense of urgency whatsoever, and it's something that the NBC guys, which was for this telecast, it was actually Mike Tirico, Tony Dungy, and Rodney Harrison. They kept pointing out that there's just no sense of urgency whatsoever. The Falcons, you're fighting for your playoff life, and you're not making any effort to really go hard at it. So it's like they basically just threw their white flag at that point. But yeah, I mean, it just killer loss, and they only had 26 rushing yards and 16 attempts. One of the things that Tony Dungy talked about is how they needed to try to throw a lot of screen passes to basically supplement for their run game, and they tried that a little bit, but it felt like they weren't doing enough of that. And then it felt like in the fourth quarter, when they were down by a bunch of points, they started doing that. They were just really foolish. So yeah, the defense gave up 4 touchdown passes, 150 rushing yards. They got torched per usual with the Falcons defense. And then offensively, nonetheless, even with some of the defensive woes, they still had their opportunities in this one. And remember, they lost a shootout to the Saints the first time back in Atlanta, 43-37 earlier in the year. This could have been a very similar game with maybe a different result, i.e. a Falcon win. But again, you can't, even if you only hold them to 17 points at half, you score 3 points in the first half because you screw it up in a million different ways. You just can't do that. So Atlanta's 4-7 now, and in a position where clearly their defense isn't going to go on a run like it did a couple years ago. Defense was top 10 last year. They're far from that this year. Dan Quinn's not coaching for his job, but a lot of his assistants are. Some of these players, they're trying to fight for jobs for next year because, of course, Atlanta has some injuries on defense. It's allowing some of these obscure guys to play. So Atlanta, it's just been a nightmare season, and it doesn't feel like the same with Detroit that's getting any better. And you were a long shot to win this game. I think Atlanta was a 13 or 13.5 point underdog coming in. Of course, they lose by 14, and I took Atlanta. So thanks a lot, Atlanta. You screwed me on that. But actually, I think I lost all 3 games on as far as the spreads. So yeah, I didn't have a very good Thanksgiving from that point of view. But anyways, nonetheless, Atlanta just, I don't know what to say. I mean, you just had your chances, and you just threw it away pretty quickly, and it just felt like that set the tone for the rest of the night. When it's not your night, it's not your night, and that's exactly what happened. So a celebration, the Big Easy, they're eating their Cajun turkey and feeling pretty damn good about life right now. And as for those Saints, Breeze, he actually did have a bad interception at one point, only his second interception of the year, but Atlanta could only get a field goal out of it. Again, that's how their night went, but still he had 4 touchdown passes. And the thing that was impressive, you can talk about his 4 touchdown passes. We can talk about the running game, 31 carries, 150 yards. So basically 5 yards a carry, just under. Kamara had, I think Alvin Kamara had like 89 yards on 14 carries. Mark Ingram had 11 for 52. But of those 4 touchdown passes, they were the 4 different receivers, which is, great and all. But the 4 different receivers are all undrafted free agents. So that's just kind of a rich getting richer type of deal where it's like, you can find guys from anywhere. And I know, NFL, you can find guys from anywhere and undrafted and everything. But especially a team like the Saints, they can just find guys from anywhere and plug in and play them into this offense and have success. So that's really encouraging because if they deal with a couple of key injuries close to the playoff time or even once the playoffs start, they know they've got a whole lot of guys that are ready to step up and play. So that's big. But the defense is the thing that I really want to talk about because, this is the Saints defense that was one of the best in football last year, was just absolutely outstanding. And they've been mostly terrible all year this year. And suddenly these last 3 games, remember they were playing the Bengals and they were playing the Eagles. So a lot of people kind of took it with a grain of salt because those teams are struggling on offense right now. And Atlanta's been kind of up and down lately too, but still doing better than those 2 teams. And yet again, they shut down another team. They make the big takeaways that they need to make. I think they have they had 4 takeaways in this game. I believe they have 9 in the last 3 games. They've allowed 38 points in the last 3 games. Of course, the last touchdown they allowed in this game was in garbage time, so felt like they allowed even less than that. They have I think they had 6 sacks in this game, something like that. And they've have like 13 in the last 3 games. They've only allowed a little over 60 rushing yards in the last 3 games, including 26 in this one. So they're just doing everything right. And on the telecast, they said they talked to Saints coaches, and they said the difference is that they're practicing way better. Well, you play the Cowboys next Thursday. Practice makes perfect because the Cowboys' running game's red hot right now. Dak Prescott, we know he's kind of all over the map like Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan, I still think is obviously a much better quarterback. But you know what I mean? Just the consistency is just not always there like it should be. So it's going to be a very, very intriguing matchup. And again, like I said, it's a huge measuring stick for the Cowboys. For the Saints, if you lose, it's not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. But I really do think the Saints are going to take care of business and beat the Cowboys. And obviously a much more intriguing matchup than it felt like a few weeks ago. But these Saints, I mean, they just keep rolling along, and for all the talks of that great Monday night game with the Rams and the Chiefs, where great, but also not great in the sense that there was no defense being played, even though there was all the takeaways and the defensive touchdowns. Still didn't feel like there was any defense being played because of the final score. But with all the talks of Rams, Chiefs, a couple other teams, can they win with their? Can they win? Championships? Can they win in January and early February with their defenses? Well, now the Saints, who are also in that conversation, because remember they just beat the Rams a few weeks back, 45-35 in a shootout at the Superdome. All of a sudden, these last few weeks, their defense is starting to surge. They can somehow keep this going the rest of the year and into the playoffs. They've got a championship defense, and again, if the Saints can get the number 1 seed in the NFC and host the NFC Championship game, obviously, in that case, they're going to be golden. So we'll see. But anyways, those are some of my Thanksgiving thoughts, and obviously look for some of my upcoming videos. College football wrap-up, obviously, soon for Week 13, as far as some of my NFL videos for Sunday and Monday Night Football. But yeah, please go to sugarhuddle.com, check out all my articles. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also like my Facebook page, which is The Sugar Huddle. Thank you.